You mentioned the word pornography, and you can just feel the room split in two. The debate gets loud, and it almost always boils down to one of two camps. It's either totally harmless fun, or it's a societal poison. But what if the truth isn't at either extreme? The actual research tells a story that's way more nuanced and honestly a lot more fascinating. So let's get into it. So, what are we really talking about here? Is it a genuine addiction, a simple fantasy, or is it something way more complex? In this explainer, we're going to sideline the shouting matches and just follow the data. We're going to look at what's happening inside the brain, how it affects our psychology, what it does to our relationships, and then finally, its impact on the culture as a whole. Okay, but before we can dive into any of that, we've got to get on the same page with our definitions. To really get a handle on the side effects, you have to know what you're actually measuring. And this isn't just about splitting hairs. This is the foundation for everything else we're about to talk about. All right, so take a look at this. This is the official clinical diagnosis from the World Health Organization. And the first thing you'll probably notice is what it's not called. It's not porn addiction. It's compulsive sexual behavior disorder, or CSBD. And the two key phrases you really need to lock onto here are failure to control and marked distress or impairment. This isn't about feeling a little guilty after the fact. It's about the behavior causing real, tangible harm to someone's life, their job, their relationships, their mental health. And this right here, this lays out the core of the confusion perfectly. On one side, you have CSBD, a precise clinical diagnosis with a strict set of criteria. On the other side, you've got porn addiction, that popular catch-all term that people use, but it can mean almost anything. But here's the most critical distinction. To get a CSBD diagnosis, your distress can't just be about feeling guilty because of your personal moral code. Yeah, and let's just pause on that for a second, because this is a really game-changing point. What this means is if someone feels a ton of guilt about watching porn only because it clashes with their moral or religious beliefs, but it's not actually blowing up their life, their work, or their relationships, then they do not have this clinical disorder. The diagnosis is specifically designed to separate a genuine behavioral problem from a crisis of conscience. All right, so our definitions are locked in. Now, let's zoom way in. We're going from the clinical manual right down to the neural level. What is actually happening inside the brain when someone is frequently watching pornography? So, you've probably heard about this. This is basically the biological chain reaction that can happen in the brain. Online porn is like a limitless buffet of new, super high-intensity visuals. Every new scene can trigger the brain's reward circuit, giving it a little hit of dopamine. Well, if you do that enough, the brain adapts. It starts expecting that level of intensity all the time. The bar for what's arousing gets raised higher and higher, which can make the slower, more subtle, real-life intimacy feel kind of bland by comparison. And this desensitization process can lead to a very real problem that researchers and doctors call pornography-induced erectile dysfunction, or PIED for short. The issue is basically this. The brain gets conditioned, it gets trained to be aroused by a very specific and very artificial kind of digital stimulation. So when a real human partner is there instead, that pre-programmed arousal template in the brain just might not switch on, and that can cause performance issues, especially in younger men. But, and this is a huge but, we've got to be super clear here. While PID is a real documented thing for some people, especially those with compulsive habits, the big, large-scale studies looking at the general population do not find a simple, direct line between watching porn and having sexual dysfunction. It's not an automatic consequence for everyone who watches. It seems to be concentrated in specific patterns of very compulsive, high-frequency use. Okay, let's zoom out one level. We've looked at the brain's hardware, now let's talk about the mind's software. And this is where things get really fascinating, because what the research shows is that why a person watches is often a much bigger deal, a bigger predictor of problems than how much they watch. And just look at these numbers. I mean, wow. When you ask people why they use porn, the answers are so revealing. In one major study, more than half, 56%, said they use it to relax or to cope. It's not just about sex. For a lot of people, it's a tool to manage stress or anxiety or just plain boredom. And that one insight just changes the entire frame, right? For a huge number of users, this is less about seeking pleasure and more about escaping pain. This brings us right to a really powerful idea in psychology called the moral incongruence model. And the idea is actually pretty simple, and this quote nails it. For many of the people who report feeling addicted, the source of their pain isn't the porn itself. It's the crushing internal conflict between their actions and their own moral compass. that intense guilt they feel from doing something they genuinely believe is wrong. And that feeling of conflict, it is incredibly potent. That internal war between what you believe and what you do, it can generate the exact same feelings of shame and powerlessness and distress that we all associate with addiction. It feels like an addiction, even when it doesn't meet that strict clinical definition we talked about earlier. So, we've covered the clinical definition, the brain, and the individual mind. Let's zoom out again to the place where this all plays out in the real world, our relationships. And this is an area where the research finds some of the most consistent negative effects, but it also reveals one massive, game-changing catch. And this slide right here shows that catch in black and white. It's like there are two totally different worlds. It turns out the context of how porn is used can change literally everything. When it's a solo, secret activity, the data consistently points to bad news, eroded trust, partners feeling insecure, lower relationship satisfaction. But, and here's the twist, when it's used openly as a couple, the results can completely flip, sometimes leading to more intimacy and better communication. So what this really boils down to for relationships is that the damage often comes not from the porn itself, but from the behavior around the porn. It's the secrecy that shatters trust. It's the dishonesty that creates distance. It's the unrealistic expectations that can make a partner feel like they're not enough. Those are the things that can poison a connection. Okay, last stop. For our final piece of this puzzle, let's pull the camera back as far as it can go. Let's zoom all the way out to the societal level. What's the cultural footprint of all this consumption? How does it shape our collective attitudes about sex and gender and relationships? And when you look at it from this high up, the research just screams one thing, loud and clear. Not all porn is created equal. When it comes to predicting harmful attitudes, the most important factor isn't how much porn someone watches, it's what kind of porn they watch. Content is everything. This chart just visualizes that point perfectly. You can see, right, there's a moderate link between general porn use and harmful attitudes. But that connection just skyrockets when you isolate sexually violent content. Watching violent pornography has a strong link to holding attitudes like hostile sexism or being more accepting of violence against women. But, and you knew this was coming, right? We have to add that critical layer of nuance once again. The data suggests that violent porn doesn't tend to just create aggressive men out of thin air. It's better to think of it as an amplifier. For individuals who are already predisposed to aggression, it can act like pouring gasoline on a fire. It provides a script for how to act, and it normalizes harmful ideas they might already have. So, after all that, after looking at the clinical definitions, the brain, the mind, relationships, and culture, what's the one big takeaway, the bottom line? It's that the answer is always, it depends. The side effects of pornography are not a given. They're conditional. It depends on the content you watch, the context you watch it in, your personal psychology, and your own moral beliefs. There's just no simple one-size-fits-all answer here. And all of this leaves us, you and me, with a challenge to change the very question we're asking. If we accept all this complexity, then the debate can't be, is porn good or bad anymore? That's a dead end. The real question, the harder but much more useful one, is this. For whom and under what conditions and with what kind of content does pornography become a problem? Answering that is the conversation we really need to be having.